In the Heights, the film, released in 2021, had the screenplay written by Chiara Alegria Hughes, and it's based on the musical stage play, music and lyrics, by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Yes, that same Lin-Manuel Miranda that birthed the sensational play Hamilton. In the Heights, the play predates all of that by like over a decade. Here's the official synopsis of it. Quote, a film version of the Broadway musical in which Usnavi, a sympathetic New York bodega owner, saves every penny every day as he imagines and sings about a better life. End quote. For those of you who don't know, In the Heights is a play on the term Washington Heights, which is a section, an area, a segment of northern Manhattan here in New York City. I believe gentrifiers are calling it Morningside Heights nowadays, but if you know, you know. Washington Heights is a melting pot, as is most of NYC, but is predominantly Hispanic and even more predominantly Dominican. It's considered like Little DR. Think Little Italy or like a Chinatown, but instead of Italians or Chinese, substitute in Dominicans. Sprinkle in some loud music, chimi spots, habichuela con dulce lady on the corner, and a shit ton of double parking, and you have yourself Washington Heights. So that's the setting of this film. I was lucky enough many years ago to see the actual play. And just to give you guys an idea of time period wise, my wife and I, Zoila, who's been on the podcast, Spun Today alum, we've been together now for over 11 years in total. Not married for that long, obviously, but together for that long. We went to go see this play as our second date ever. In hindsight, it was a thirsty, pretentious move on my part, shelling out a few $100s for orchestra seats to a Broadway play for a second date. Especially knowing what I know now, which is she would have been more than happy with going out for like a slice or something. Anyway, so that was like literally like 10, 11 years ago. And I believe that was Lin-Manuel Miranda's first play, at least on Broadway. It obviously had a successful run, and he later went on to create Hamilton, which is obviously like one of the most successful plays ever, which I've spoken about here on the podcast. And actually, very quick aside, I saw Dasha Polanco at one of the times that I went to go see Hamilton. She was like sitting right by me, and she is actually in this film remake of the play. So I thought that was pretty cool. Shout out to her. And for me, I really enjoyed it. It wasn't like a movie. It was more like a remake of the musical, but like on screen, but not completely musical. You know what I mean? It's not like when you watch Hamilton now on like Disney Plus or something like that, where it's literally a recording of the stage. This is filmed like a movie. There is like spoken dialogue and narrative, but they bust out in like singing and dancing, like in a Bollywood movie, for example. And they do so all throughout, which is pretty cool. I know my nieces loved it too, and one of them told me that specifically, like she loved like all the singing in it, and that there was like so much singing and dancing throughout it, and that she was dancing the whole time while watching it. Now, there's a bunch of different cool things that resonated with me throughout watching it, which I'm going to share with you, which might give away a bit more of like the storyline. There might be like some spoilers. I'm not sure if there will be, but there might be. So if you're worried about that, now's your chance to skip ahead. There was one scene where Abuelita speaks about these embroidered napkins that she had that were handcrafted and were her mother's. And it actually made me think of, and shout out to Eileen Martinez, which has been on the Spun Today podcast, again, another Spun Today alum, which also shared some stories about her and her grandmother and her learning embroidery from her grandmother. Check out episode 165 of the Spun Today podcast if you haven't done so already, so you can check that out. But shout out to Eileen Martinez. And there was something that she said specifically when she and someone else were like admiring the like craftsmanship and work of the embroidered napkins. And she said something to the effect of, the little details are what tell the world that we're not invisible. And, she was speaking to the plight of an immigrant coming to this country and feeling invisible and like grinding and working hard, coupled with her pride of being Cuban. She's Cuban. And just the sentiment behind like being proud of like who you are and what it is that you do and putting that into what it is that you do. And it resonated with me, not just from the point of view of the immigrant mentality, which I can empathize with and relate to, being that my family's from the Dominican Republic, but just the sentiment behind focusing on the little details of your work, of your craft, even if you feel invisible as a writer or as a podcaster, Spun Today, but still having that sense of pride in what you do. I thought that was dope. And that goes into the next point that I wanted to share, which was a scene where Nina's father, which is played by Jimmy Smits, was speaking about starting his small business, which was at this point a fairly successful large taxi service. And he was telling the story of how he started, and he literally started with 2 cars, then rented out a small location, later expanded that location, and slowly, increased in number of cars. And he said the statement, "Start small, dream big." I also really like the song "We Are Powerless" because it had many different levels to it. It was like a double entendre on the fact that they were literally in a blackout, which on one level, you can relate to the fact that in a lot of these countries, especially DR, like the electricity, the power goes, like it goes out very frequently. It could be multiple times a day, definitely multiple times a week. It could be every day for a few days straight. They might get a day or two in between where your power is good, but it's literally just like a part of the way of life over there. And, if you are lucky enough to live near like a hospital or a school or like a place that can't lose power, and you happen to be close enough in proximity to like share the same electrical lines and outlets, you might be lucky and not have that issue, but that's like few and far between. And also many people in DR have like backup generators because this is such like a common occurrence. Like all the resorts and shit, for example, will have backup generators, so you won't feel that if you visit in that way. But some residential like houses that can afford it also have that. So for me, it related to that and the fact that in the movie they were literally in a blackout and they were speaking about being powerless. But the "We Are Powerless" was also like a double entendre to we as a people are powerless. Our voices are not heard. And a lot of the lyrics throughout the song spoke to that sentiment and that struggle and that plight. I also appreciated like the attitude of making the best of a bad situation and being in that blackout. Like they took the opportunity to start shooting fireworks and appreciating the darkness of that night sky. A constant theme of the movie was the fact that everybody has their own quote unquote sueñito, which for my Hispanically challenged friends out there means a dream. Everybody has their own dream. And you had that with all of the characters, where Usnavi, the main character, he's the bodega owner and he's like saving up money and wants to go to DR to open up this like bar restaurant spot on the beach that his deceased father used to own. And he remembers so fondly from his childhood, from going over there as a kid. You have Jimmy Smits, his character, who owns the taxi service, who realized that sueñito and then had the dream of being able to provide for his daughter, who has gone off to college, and paying her tuition at an expensive Ivy League school. I think it was Columbia or NYU. I think Columbia though. And it's something that he regretted not being able to do himself in going through school. Then she, on the flip side, felt like she didn't fit in that environment, and she just wanted to come back into the neighborhood. You have another character who's one of the beauticians. She works at a salon. She plays Usnavi's, I forget her name, but she plays Usnavi's love interest. Her sueñito is to get the fuck out of Dodge and become a fashion designer. You have Abuelita, who has realized her sueñito of just looking after the kids in the neighborhood. And in that very it takes a village mentality, help raise them and help be like a rock and a cornerstone for each of them. And she also has a sueñito of win the lottery one day. And so it goes with life, right? Everybody has a sueñito. I want to be a writer and podcaster. I want to take my full-time job and part-time hobby and flip that around to a full-time hobby and part-time job. Everybody has their thing. Even if it's just, I'm dreaming for the weekend to come so I can go to the beach or chill out on the couch and relax. Which leads me to another song, which I actually remembered from the play, because I didn't remember a lot of the play until like rewatching or watching the movie rather. And then some of it came back. But this song, Paciente Fe, I definitely remember from the play. And Paciente Fe translates to patience and faith. And you can definitely take that in the religious context and have that as like a guiding force in your life. But in my opinion, you don't have to. You can also have faith and patience in your pursuits. Have faith and patience in your craft. Have faith and patience in whatever it is that you're passionate about. So I definitely appreciate the sentiment behind that song and the message behind it, or embedded within it, rather. A line I liked from it was, I forget who it was that was saying it, but they were referring to something that Abuelita always said, which is asserting our dignity in small ways. And that's true definitely as a people, but on the individual level as well. And ties back into what we spoke about earlier in terms of the little details that tell the world that we're not invisible. Another scene that was pretty cool is between Jimmy Smith's character and his daughter, which I'm forgetting if her name was Vanessa, if she was Vanessa or if she was Nina. I think Nina. Anyway, it's a scene that they come to a resolution for like the beef that they have, because like I mentioned before, he's like paying for her college, her room and board, and she just wants to come back to the neighborhood because she, one, doesn't want to impose on her father, who is like selling away pieces of his business to be able to afford paying for her room and board and tuition, but also because she feels out of place around these Ivy Leaguers and like she doesn't belong and she's treated differently. But they come to a resolution on that issue, and he says something to her which I thought was interesting, which he was happy about, and it was kind of like a passing the torch type of moment, where he tells her something to the effect of that she can see a future that he no longer can. And he said it like in a positive light, like in the way that his father couldn't see why he didn't drop out of school. Like his father wanted him to go work at the factory to help with supporting the family, but instead immigrated and hustled and started his own business of, you know, the 2-car taxi service. And in that way, it made him okay with the resolution that came about with their issue. Something funny, which I actually thought, and is one of the only other things that I remember from the actual play, but I actually thought they executed it better in the play and kind of like glossed over it in the movie, which was Usnavi's name. Usnavi, the main character who owns the bodega and wants to go back to DR, spells his name Usnavi. And, you know, they ask him, you know, that's like a weird name. I never heard that name before. Where does it come from, etc. And he explains that when his parents were coming to New York, they were on a boat, and then they see this like massive, huge ship, more grand than anything they've ever seen. And then plastered alongside the hull of the boat was U.S. Navy, for United States Navy. And they decided to name their kid that, Usnavi. And I know that's like a popular favorite from the play, and it was fun hearing that again. Now, the last thing I want to address about the play, about this like movie film remake of the play, is related to you cancel culture fucks. I don't even know what to call you. You're the culture vultures. The folks and critics that are like shitting on this play and on lin-manuel Miranda because he supposedly didn't cast enough Afro-Latinos, not enough like black Hispanics in the play. You people truly disgust me. You're taking the creative accomplishment of someone who busted their ass working on their craft, honing their craft, and was one of the lucky few, that happens to be a Latino, by the way, one of the lucky few that breaks through and is able to bring his ideas, his dreams, his execution to fruition for the benefit, for the enjoyment of us, the masses, of you, culture vulture fucks. And in the process of executing his dream, his vision, for our viewing pleasure, he creates hundreds of jobs for writers and staff and choreographers and dancers and merchandising, ushers at the plays, is able to live off of his art, which most of us in our lifetimes will only dream of. And all you crabs in a bucket ass mentality motherfuckers can do is find something wrong with it and shit on it. And I say fuck you so vehemently because you're only doing it to virtue signal. You're only doing it to belittle and shit on someone else, to satisfy that crabs in the bucket mentality of yours. Because if you apply your own logic, your warped fucking logic, you will look at something like his smash hit play Hamilton and realize that the biography, the life story of Alexander Hamilton and all those involved, all those white folks that were involved in the historical truth of that story, the same person, lin-manuel Miranda, that you're shitting on now for not having enough darker, quote-unquote, Latinos in the play, in the movie, in the film, literally recast every single white person in the historical story of Alexander Hamilton as all blacks and Latinos. You stupid fucks, but that doesn't count, right? He's in absolute rare air with what he's been able to accomplish within his craft, within his art. And the ripple effects of how his accomplishments and those of the people that he was able to put on, the ripple effects of that inspiration that's going to come and has come from all of that is unquantifiable. And still, it's not enough. You got to find something to shit on it about. You're fucking disgusting. And for any of you other cats that agree with the sentiment behind this cancel culture type crabs in the bucket ass mentality bullshit,
you only get half a bar. Fuck y'all niggas.
And for everybody else that wants to see a dope film, a dope play, and big up your fellow Latino brothers and sisters that worked hard on bringing this project to fruition, check out In the Heights in theaters now and also available on HBO Max.